When the coronavirus pandemic hit, we sat at a crossroads. Acumen has done a lot in energy access over the last 12 years. In many ways, our portfolio accounts for 25% of all of energy access progress that's been made to date. That is monumental. And when coronavirus hit, we were in the middle of dispersing our Pioneer Energy Investment Initiative, which is our latest initiative to support enterprises with energy access. We were approaching 25 companies in our portfolio. And then word hits that a global pandemic is on the way. And everyone was just thinking about supply chain crunches and what this was going to mean. And for all the progress that's been made in energy access, we felt a call to action. So in light of this, I wanted to just start by sharing a video of what I mean by all the progress that's been made, and then dive into the response we've had. Have a Q&A with Steve Ross and Vivian, who leads Rve.Sol, and Steve's a partner. So without further ado.
When everyone has access to clean, reliable, affordable energy, I can see a transformed society. A society where healthcare, education services, and just the quality of life has improved across the board.
Energy is the foundation of everything that you do. You wake up in the morning, you check your phone, you turn on your computer, you make breakfast with energy, you do everything. Everything relies on energy. There's 1 billion people who were excluded from modern society because they've got none of it.
We always say energy gives people power, but renewable energy gives people a future.
We have to reach more than 1 billion people by 2030 if we want to achieve universal access.
The gaps in the energy sector include the lack of patient financing or capital.
We need to have finance that is supportive, we need to have policies that is supportive, we need to have the right technology, and that all needs to come together. And each and every one of us has a separate role in that, so we need to collaborate.
When I think about if we really achieve SDG 7 in 2030, we're cooking with clean solutions and there's less environmental and health impacts. We're using energy for productive use. We're using energy or electricity for education.
People in the house get more productive hours to be able to study, for shops to be open late into the evening. It means safety, it means independence, it means freedom.
And it's a world actually where we use energy sources that are not harming the planet.
It's a very exciting time because I think for the first time we see that achieving universal energy access is possible.
Some scary prospects in there for those who caught those stats at the end. And that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some of the information that we just saw and what we're doing about it. So I'm going to start with a story. And I think the story of how this relief fund that Acumen is now spearheading got off the ground is pretty remarkable, because in my mind, it tells a lot about the way I think Acumen rises to a challenge. So it was March, and I think we all remember the headlines that coronavirus is really picking up in China, and we knew that a lot of our energy access companies source products from China. So Sarah and I, under the advice of Yasmina and Otho and various people at Acumen, said, why don't we get a bunch of investors together to just talk about this problem and see what everyone else is doing. And over the course of the next 3 weeks, what emerged was something we never could have predicted, that Sarah and I would be spending pretty much 24/7 around the clock, glued to our phones and emails, dreaming up a $100 million relief fund. The data started coming in really quickly that companies and customers were panicking. And in one way, we could have done what every other investor was mostly doing, which is let's look after our portfolio and see what we can do to support them. But we realized that there was a big enough community around energy access to rise to a greater challenge. And that was to provide the right type of capital to companies that really needed it. And we knew that these companies were thriving before coronavirus. We were seeing profitability, $1.75 billion invested in the sector, 800 million people have gained energy access over the last decade, and 45% of those have been from startups. Of all the business models that Acumen's ever been able to support, energy access has been one that has proven the impact investing thesis correct. And yet, we just saw a challenge emerging where companies were fledgling and customers were going to be facing a crisis. And that's when we realized that if we could bring together commercial capital with philanthropic capital to balance the risk associated with a relief fund, we could do it. It did not come without its challenges. To convince commercial investors to bend over backwards and break the rules and bring things to their investment committee with interest rates that they'd never seen as low before was tough. To answer emails from grant makers as to why this was important, tell governments that this was a coordinated effort and then they should be there, was difficult. Our fund manager, I was finally taking a break in July. I was so thrilled to not be at my computer for a week, and I land to be with my family, and I turn on my phone, and our fund manager pulled out while I was on my 8-hour flight to the United States to be with my family, which sort of blew up that holiday. But you know, we just didn't stop at that point and found a new fund manager who's actually made the facility even better. And here we are now at the end of the year, nearly ready to disperse capital, having raised almost the full amount that we need to really get this thing off the ground. It has been a demonstration of collaboration like I've never seen before, of persistence, of grit, of data collecting, of questioning ourselves, wondering if we're doing the right thing, and needing each other to kind of get through the day, sometimes just to vent. So without further ado, here we are, and I'm really excited to talk to Steve and Viv about this journey, about what energy access has meant on the ground to customers, to companies, and to people like Steve who've been with Acumen through the journey of our traditional patient capital model and also recognizing the importance of this challenge that's ahead of us. And then I'll turn it over to questions because I'd say this is a new challenge. No one's ever built a relief fund for an SDG before, and hear from you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to open it up to Steve. Steve, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Leslie, and all.
Steve, you got involved in Acumen years ago, and you've been part of this journey with us to think through what the intersection really of energy access means. And obviously energy is a huge part of our portfolio. It makes up over 35% of our investments. When you heard about the COVID pandemic, I'd be curious to know, what you saw as you've been involved in the sector as the role of energy access in tackling poverty in light of COVID-19.
I've been fortunate to be part of the Acumen community and be able to travel with some of the Acumen staff and investees. It's been a great experience for me. And I'll just share a real highlight quick was being in a house where they had electricity for the first time on a Rve.Sol mini grid. It's great. But it is really important. And the video does a nice job of speaking to the role of energy access and patient capital. No question that there's a direct correlation between access to energy and movement out of poverty. As I look at what had been unique maybe in this period of the COVID pandemic, I think three things maybe come to mind as being highlights of the importance of energy access. And maybe, Leslie, I'll go in the sequence of three. One being the most interesting, second, maybe the most obvious, and third, the most sobering. The most interesting to me has been the way that the COVID pandemic has revealed the priority of energy. My experience is mostly at the mini-grid level, and guys like Vivian know a whole lot more about this than I do, but at the mini-grid level, it appears that consumption patterns are largely unchanged. Vivian mentioned that in the face of cost increases on basic staples like sugar and corn, customers are not cutting back on their spending on energy. So they're finding other places to cut back. They're making trade-offs. Energy is not one of those. So energy clearly has a high priority in their lifestyle and is no longer viewed as a luxury, but more as an essential good. And I think that's a great affirmation of Acumen's energy access strategy. Second, most obvious is that COVID underscores how important healthcare really is, and maybe how ill-equipped the health centers are to deal with sickness. I'm close to a company called Village Energy based in Uganda, run by a Acumen fellow, and I talk with her frequently, and here's some fun facts that she shared with me about COVID. There are 5,000 health centers in Uganda, 2,000 of those lack electricity. Hard to provide proper healthcare without it. There's an acute need for high efficiency refrigeration. Again, hard to provide proper healthcare without it. On the business side, 90% of the recent sales growth has been driven by health centers. In fact, in the month of August alone, they booked more health center projects than in the cumulative history of the company. And Village Energy is just one data point. Vivian, as part of the African Mini Grid Developers Association, can share more. But clearly, AMDA has identified health centers more broadly as a need, and it's a market opportunity as well. Funding, some NGOs are lining up with some funding too, so it's all good. There's a need, and there's companies in place that can meet that need. Part of the good news is there is funding. The not so good news is that this market is really fragmented and decentralized, and it's going to be difficult to reach at scale. And lastly, one thing that's different, I think, about this is the highlighting of the need for outdoor lighting as security. And maybe this is our most sobering. In the words of the Village Energy CEO, she says, well, lights help security, and security needs are higher during lockdown because so many people have lost their jobs. These are sad truths. And yeah, it's a business opportunity for Village Energy, and it's a major part of Rve.Sol's business model. But these are real people that have real challenges, and these businesses have challenges too. And so yeah, COVID's a bit of an eye-opener for us all.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into sharing more from an on-the-ground experience with Vivian. Vivian is the CEO of Rve.Sol, a mini-grid company we invested in last year from our Pioneer Energy Investment Initiative. And I think everyone's really eager to, one, just learn a bit about your business, but to also share what's going on the ground, both for your customers and for your business outlook in light of COVID.
Yeah, cool. So we operate in Kenya as Kudura Power East Africa. Over the last year, with significant help from Acumen's investment, we multiplied our customer base by 25. We multiplied our employee base by 5, and putting in place teams and structures and processes to serve 2,500 customers as an energy utility. And for everybody's benefit, a mini grid really is just a grid distributing electricity as you would normally have at home to an area of a country or a county that is not connected to the national grid. We generate our power with solar. So typically we have small solar farms, and we store power in batteries, and we provide power to those customers 24 hours a day. COVID has been interesting because we kind of hit that growth spurt Q1 this year, and we were just getting set up for all these new customers and the excitement associated with that, and lots of new hires and training people and so on. And suddenly COVID hit, and we were like, wow, how can this happen? We fought this long and this hard to get to kind of the first step in our scale-up plans. And it was really interesting. It was scary at first. So what have we seen? Really interesting. So we spent a fair amount of time and effort in putting appliances into households and small businesses, because access to finance is generally kind of what we consider the third impediment to rural development. These customers are not ready to be financed by banks yet because they're typically unbanked. So we're financing those appliances. Energy has gone from being a luxury to becoming absolutely critical to life within the space of 6 months for some 10,000 new people we provided service to.
When we made the investment in Rve.Sol, a lot of the thesis around investment is about growth and scaling, obviously, your business. So before I pop it over to Steve, Viv, I have one more question, which is, what is the risk of not scaling, right? What is the risk of not having enough cash in this moment as you look at your business model?
Yeah, so those two questions are kind of separate. I think let's talk about cash maybe first. We've gone, despite this kind of enormous growth we went through beginning of the year, we're planning on quadrupling that again in the next 12 months. And we have some amount of that financing lined up already. To close the deal, however, we're having discussions with equity investors that are in final stages of evaluation, but everything is just really slowed down. That means overall that, as a business that's growing, its revenue is growing and is still requiring external investment, we are still under cash constraints. And, every month that we spend trying to get regulatory items done, but then we can't do them because the government has shut their offices, it impacts us very directly. And then, of course, the fundamental fact that expectations have been created with a lot of new communities. And then the second part of the question, I take pride in the fact that we have less than 3% of our employees are expatriates. I don't count myself as one of them because I'm based out of Portugal. But our employees are all local, and probably 70% of them are secondary school trained. We spend a lot of time and effort training them on the tools and processes to do their jobs, from customer service and that kind of thing, so generally non-technical roles. And I think what's important here is for our business to get to real scale, we need to build a model that ultimately the cost of serving a site in terms of operational costs does not exceed the revenue that site generates. And so the challenge there is really that to do that, we need immense scale. Based on our cost structures currently on our 5-year plan, we're planning on building 350 sites, serving over 85,000 households and businesses in Kenya. And that's the kind of scale we need to make this a true utility business that can weather, changes in consumption patterns, that can weather drought and all of the kind of things that normally happen in life. And when you take 12 months out of a growth plan like that, that has a pretty significant impact. And the last thing I'll say is that Acumen is, besides the equity investment that they made, that you guys made in us, we've had access to numerous small grants that have helped us to continue doing what we need to be doing.
It's really helpful to see that on the ground look and even understand, if a customer expects power and it's not coming, that matters, right? Imagine, I remember for all of us to relate to, even during, Hurricane Sandy and various blackouts, like even a couple of hours without power is one thing, but to be waiting and waiting and waiting for your power to come, knowing that the business that's, going to be providing that can't because of various constraints, it's frustrating. And, we're thinking about dignity and what that life looks like. So it's really helpful to hear that perspective. So Steve, a question for you. You've been on the Energy Access Relief Fund journey as well as the PEII journey from day one as a partner who's deeply invested in energy access. Given your role on boards, given your role, visiting various companies, why do you think the Relief Fund is important, and what have been some of your observations about its development and evolution over time?
Thanks, Leslie. That's an easy question. I'm happy to have easy questions, and I'll keep it brief so that we have time for questions from others. Talk about being nimble, right? And so Acumen was quick out of the gate. Got started really quickly. The first email I got from Sarah was March 25th. And that was early on. Our kids were still thinking they were just told they weren't going back to campus, right? So being quick and nimble, time was of the essence. That was a really important observation and way to get started. I think you have to start with all of this by underscoring that Acumen is important. And, I speak to partners because this is a partner gathering, right? So, it's us. Acumen really does matter to many. And it matters because of the funding, yes, but it also matters because of its leadership. But it's symbolic too. And to me as a partner, it says that Acumen is going to stand by their investees and that the community is going to stand by their sector. We can all be proud of the leadership that Acumen plays in the sector. And, I don't know the other sectors so well, so I won't speak to that. But Acumen has earned a level of authority because they've been there and they've been through it, and they stand by, they stand with the poor, as Jacqueline likes to say. So as a partner, we can be proud, right? These folks live up to the hype and they walk the talk. By all measures, as Jacqueline said earlier this afternoon, Acumen is more than an impact investor. And I feel like the impact of our support doesn't always show up in ROI and YOY and EBITDA, or lives impacted and companies exited, but by softer measures of leadership and reliability and dedication and audacity. Like this Energy Access Fund has taken a long time. We got a quick start. As Leslie said, the fund manager pulled out, and things always take longer than you think they will. But they have persevered, and it's coming together. But it has, we had, as Stephen Hutt said, we've got to see the cash start changing hands, and I think we're going to see that here in October. It's right upon us, and as a partner, I'm proud. I'm an individual partner. For those of you that are corporate partners, I think you're doing your company a service. And their name should be on the list of who's who in the energy sector space, because it's rare company that you're in on that list. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, yeah, you're saying things that Sarah and I certainly wouldn't say, but the amount of times I think I've called you crying on a Friday night to say how frustrating things are, I think it underpins kind of the reaction you're having now. So thank you for being there for us. And we're not there yet, but we're getting there for sure. And we're really grateful to have your support in many ways. Viv, I'm going to turn it back to you. So I look at our Pioneer Energy Investment Initiative portfolio, just our newest investees, the ones we've invested in. There's been 9 companies. These 9 companies have provided power to 675,000 people already, and these are brand new startups. So I couldn't be more proud of the portfolio. And in some ways, energy access is at a tipping point. We've seen so much progress made, and that progress is at risk, obviously, with COVID-19. So what do you need to continue serving low-income customers at this stage with your business? How have you navigated some of the challenges in the last couple of months? And, curious how the Relief Fund will play a role in actually helping rebuild greener, cleaner, and better in Kenya.
Yeah, so I mean, we actually went through a 3-month furlough period, middle of the year, and that was less as a matter of necessity and more just of concern, discussion with the board that we were seeing the funding pipeline not closing when we needed it to, and so we just decided to be prudent and kind of cut back the burn rate somewhat. Interestingly enough, I mean, I'm very proud of the people I work with. Almost to a T. People were saying, well, then let's start working 50% for a period of time and make sure that this thing works through. So that I'm really proud of. That worked well, notwithstanding that, we have seen that coming towards the end of the year, we're going to have a bit of a cash crunch. Of course, we've got our name in the fray for the Energy Access Relief Fund, and looking forward to some good news, hopefully in the near term. In the interim, though, Acumen has helped us with some additional grants, that are going to see us go through. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's been learning and trying, but I kind of think, if we make it through this kind of phase under these conditions, then really the sky is absolutely the limit. And within, in the bigger context, certainly from the point of view of data we have from AMDA, from the African Mini Grid Developers Association, we are seeing now a number of, in Africa, there's probably heading for 100 mini-grid operators, developers and operators out there already in one form or another. Many of them are very small, just starting out. A large part of those are led by African entrepreneurs. They've got a one hell of a learning curve to go through to raise capital for this business, because this business is very capex intensive. It's an infrastructure business at the end of the day, and it requires investors that see the long game, which is really why we're pleased that we got you guys on board. Because it's clear that you understand not only our customers, like very few investors might, but understand the longer sense of the business. And the biggest concern, I think, with a lot of these companies starting out is it may almost seem too difficult to fulfill that vision, right? As an entrepreneur, you have a vision for something you want to do, and for us, it's really to provide energy and water to rural communities. They really should have those basic services, but don't for so many reasons. And you have new entrepreneurs stepping into the space, kind of inspired by some of the larger operators that are starting to show some serious growth. And I'm just really concerned that they're going to get demotivated by how difficult it is, because it's difficult at the best of times. Now it's even more difficult, and I'm concerned they're going to get demotivated, and we'll see potentially people with visions that should be achieved not being able to be achieved.
I just want to zoom out and say what I think I'm most proud of with our energy access work is our ability to use the right type of capital to solve problems. And in energy access, it's much more than just the Relief Fund. We have our Pioneer Energy Investment Initiative that continues to support early stage companies that are showing scale for the poor. We have our Modern Energy Cooking Services program. I'm thrilled to see Malcolm here working on clean cooking, thinking through innovative solutions on one of the toughest business models that's had trouble scaling, which is clean cooking. And we have Kawasaki Ventures, which is our response to growth stage ventures in East Africa, making sure that that capital continuum stays for the tail end of growth. So for an organization of about 100 people, continue to be impressed how we're trying to be responsive with using this capital in the right way and respond to problems.